And then we have a massive derailment um, in Ohio
Wow.
that is just, I mean, Eastern Palestine, Ohio, that the information that we are being fed from the government does not correspond with what people are seeing on the ground. So there's a lot of questions to be asked on that.
That's why the balloons are the distraction. That's why the balloons are the distraction. They don't want you looking at what's going on in Ohio.
Okay.
The news has changed. Initially, it was the fact that there was no reaction. Pete Buttigieg wouldn't speak about it. And now it's the government trying to catch up and say, no, it's not as bad as you think. It's kind of like the economy's better than you think. They're covering it up now.
Well, yeah. The APA was just there and came out and said, trust the government.
Of course.
Nothing's going on here. Trust the government. But yet all these other people are posting videos that live there that show water contamination. That's why they got all the balloons.
Government hasn't been very transparent in all of this. And now today I see the NSTB director is calling for people to stop their misinformation, that the NSTB is going to be as transparent as they can with this investigation, and that it takes time, and the protocols the NSTB or at NTSB, get my acronyms right, have in place work. Okay, but yet we have other agencies like the EPA telling us that, hey, nothing to see here, everything's all fine, but yet we find out that very hazardous chemicals are getting into the Ohio River. Not to mention that very hazardous chemicals are being burned off to enter our atmosphere.
Good, Jen.
Yeah, to me, some of this that I find really interesting is they're not telling us that the train was on fire way before it derailed. The train miraculously derailed on one of the most important culverts that lead into the Ohio River and elsewhere. And I thought this would be good to bring to you, Mr. Boss, because you know more about this stuff. We all know they keep preaching to us, you will own nothing and you'll be happy about it.
Yeah.
Is it true that the government can take over any property that has been, how did they put it, chemical laden?
No. You're thinking that's a mix of two different ideas of eminent domain, and there is another, I'm forgetting the term, where the government can take over certain properties for protection of the public. But no, the government can't just walk in and take over property. As in the case of eminent domain, there has to be a clear and explicit reason for the government to take property, such as we're putting a hospital in, which will benefit the entire community. And because of the eminent need and the benefit to the entire public, and if there is no other way to build that hospital without having that property, then the government will come in and they don't take it, they will purchase it. Of course, at a price that is supposed to be marketplace, which doesn't necessarily reflect its actual value, but they will buy that property, take it, then take it over and build that public facility. That's the way it's supposed to work. That isn't how it actually functions in many places, like in Utica, New York, where we've seen a big thing about that and the hospitals being built there. The community itself didn't want it. The politicians wanted it. It was a means of moving money around in New York State.
let me stop you for just a second. I just pulled up. It says the laws governing Agenda 2030 land development allow governments to seize polluted lands and move their residents into smart cities.
Agenda 20, anything that says agenda, any of the like Agenda 2030, Agenda 2021, or any of those, that's UN. It has no standing in the United States. There
No.
may be a statute in the
Okay.
UN that says for countries that agree or accept their policy, their principles, that they will follow that, but it has no standing in the United States. Theoretically, Congress would have to adopt, propose, and vote on and pass a law to adopt any proposal of or agenda of the UN. So I know people will point to that, and I've heard about Agenda 21 and Agenda 30. I'm familiar with that. To ESG is sometimes what it's called out in Europe. And that's just a idea of the government manipulating communities towards a more progressive socialist ideology with climate change in mind.
With the way things are and everything, sometimes you have to wonder, is this stuff being done for a reason? Or is it just happening?
More common than not that trains run into issues. Now, derailments can be as simple as they're starting the train up and there's the one of the tracks gets a little moved or one of the wheels come off. It doesn't mean that there's this big pile up every time that there's a derailment. Very often they're able to stop the train safely. People and products are able to be removed properly. But it's the severity that we're talking about. The severity isn't what we see in Ohio. I mean, I personally, this was going back 15 years ago.
One is because of the outrage of the citizens and the fact that so many citizens had to be dislocated from their homes because of the hazards that are involved. Another reason why it is getting so much attention.
Right. That's what I'm saying is they minimize it. I don't want people to think, oh, I'm discounting what's happened and understanding the background of it. But what's in this case, where we have such a where they made the decision rather than to try any other form of cleanup, the answer was, let's burn the chemicals. Let's only move people within 1 mile, knowing that they set off an airborne chemical agents into the air, which would spread much further than within 1 mile, that they're not looking at the evacuation services from FEMA are not affecting a much larger area that is within fallout and precipitation of these chemicals immediately, which is, some people say, about 50 miles. You could say 20, in that range. There are so many people who are being affected by this. And the fact that when it did come to light, when it did get national attention, the immediate response by Pete Buttigieg and the Biden-Harris administration and the news media was to initially ignore it, and now they're downplaying it. That's where the reaction is coming from. That's where all the outrage is, and it should be, because they're playing politics. Well, did you hear about the avian flu? Did you hear about there is the H5N1 avian flu,
Right.
which the U.S. government have been modifying. Again, another gain of function situation with this. Now, the avian flu has been around for about 2.5 years. It's
avian flu, bird flu has been around for decades.
No, the latest one. The latest one that's been killing poultry and chicken in the last 2.5 years is the H5N8 version.
Okay.
Which literally a year ago, and it'll be February 21st, will be 1 year from when I first noticed in the first case of the H5N8 avian flu being transmitted to human beings. 2 days ago, we just got the news. It just started circulating in several, I think it was science.com and a couple of other sources, that we found out that it's potentially because of the manipulation, the labs there, the Wuhan labs, where they were manipulating gain of function. Same thing seems to happen in this case. And the problem here is if they do find it more transmittable, if this is actually the same strain that we saw from 1 year ago, this thing is about 60% contagious and 33% deadly.
Because our enemies are doing gain of function research on these same viruses. So we have to do it in order to stay ahead of them and come up with the antidotes just in case they decide to release one of these virulent viruses on the general public. Weren't there tons and tons and tons of treaties signed by pretty much every nation state in the world that they weren't going to develop biological weapons?
Right after World War One, yes. It was one of the major treaties of World War One that we were going to ban various chemical weapons, especially for warfare purposes, because what mustard gas did and how horrific it was. Yeah, so for 100 years, more at this point, 110 years, the world has already agreed, no, we're not going to do that. The only people who've really violated that have been Syria, Iraq.
And ultimately, it comes down to the more government expands its power, the less liberty we as a people have.
This happened in Oregon. It was on the 16th, yesterday. I don't know. Most people didn't notice it. Again, everyone's focusing on Ohio, so no one's really paying attention to all of the other things happening around the country that are continuing to happen. In Oregon, several of the cities and counties decided that they wanted to be sanctuary cities. Now, when I say that, I don't mean sanctuary city like immigration, like we see in California, which is a sanctuary state, or New York, which is sanctuary state, like New York City. No, I mean they're a Second Amendment sanctuary city, that they decided that the federal government could not make decisions that would affect them on the local level, that their law enforcement could not enforce, as an example, red flag laws, that was not constitutional. Or some of the bans we've seen, or some of the ATF saying that braces are now machine guns, and therefore you don't have a right to do that. And they said, no, you can't enforce that. So we just saw that the court came out and said, no, that's not possible, that the government does have the right, and you as a local community cannot deny the federal government's place. Now, here's the thing that I find interesting. This is now going to be used in every state around the country to say you have to obey the ATF. You have to obey the federal government when it comes to the Second Amendment. Well, here's the thing. If, and this is a tricky point that no one's brought up, if a state, a city, a county cannot make up their own decision about the Second Amendment and saying, oh, we have a sanctuary, you can't do that about immigration either, can you? So every city, every state, every county that said they are Second Amendment sanctuary, immigration sanctuary cities and sanctuary counties and states for illegal aliens, they can't do that, because the argument that's made here is it would have the potential to lead to uncertainty for firearm owners concerning the legality of their conduct as they travel from county to county. All you have to do is replace firearm owners and put in illegal aliens. It's the exact same principle. It's the exact same ruling. And see, that's why we need to talk about things like this, folks. There's so much of this that's going to the wayside because people just aren't paying attention. It's
that's
terrifying.
very, very true. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why we do what we do, is try to bring that awareness and hopefully that we reach the right people. Frank is at actually a very important meeting for the Liberty First Foundation right now. The meeting that Frank is at actually stemmed from a call that I got on Wednesday. In the fall, winter of 2024, the National Medal of Honor Museum will be opening up in Arlington, Texas.
Oh, cool.
What if I give you